The Traveller's League Book 1 The Timepiece, written by Nick Goss. An Errand. The Traveller's Code stated that adventures are wasted on those who don't learn, and Hoops needed to be prepared for the underwater world by gearing up, resting up and having some way of documenting everything he might discover. He cracked open his piggy bank and shoved all the bills and coins into his pocket. When he walked, he jingled and his pockets were stuffed so full they looked like a chipmunk's cheeks. Locking the front door behind him, he went outside to the front of the apartment building and got in a taxi. "Scuba Stan's dive shop, please," he told the driver. The taxi took off while Hoops counted his money in the back seat. $48.62. Surely that would be enough. When he arrived at Scuba Stan's, he paid the cab driver, but it cost $20 for the ride. That was almost half of everything he had. Things were so expensive in the city and he didn't really know why. It's no wonder Mum must work all the time. Just then he realised he'd been thinking about his next adventure so much he forgot he was grounded. "Oh no, Mum's going to freak out on toast." The taxi driver waited while Hoops went into the dive shop. Scuba Stan had everything you could imagine, wetsuits of every size and design, scuba masks, snorkels, flippers, harpoons, air tanks and underwater cameras. "Can I help you, kid?" said Scuba Stan. "I need a scuba suit and enough air to last 4 hours underwater." Hoops tried to sound grown up. Scuba Stan said, "How many days do you want to rent it?" "Just for this afternoon, sir." Hoops confessed he'd hoped it would be cheaper to only rent the gear for a few hours. "Okay, kid, I think I have something in your size. Hang on." Scuba Stan disappeared behind the curtain, then came back with his arms full of underwater gear. "That'll be $60, kid." $60? I'm only going to be gone for like 3 hours. Hoops was angry at himself for blowing $20 on a taxi ride, all for nothing. "How much do you have?" said Scuba Stan. $28.62. Hoops was embarrassed. "Well, that's not enough for the scuba suit. But is there anything else you're interested in?" Stan was a nice man. "What about an underwater camera? You can buy it for $20. He would absolutely need an underwater camera because journals didn't work underwater. Hoops said, "I'll take it." He ran outside with his new, totally amazing camera to where the taxi driver still waited for him. "You ready to go back home, kid?" Hoops confessed he only had $8 and change, and asked the driver if it would be enough to get him home. "Not a chance," grumbled the taxi driver as he drove off to find some paying customers. It was a long walk home. Hoops knew how to get back home and wasn't scared of the city. He was scared of his mum. If he didn't make it home before she got off work, he'd be grounded for the rest of his life. As he ran, he tried to think of some way to get his hands on enough money to rent the scuba gear. After all, a shortage of money was the main problem. An amazing idea flashed into his mind. It was so obvious that he stopped running and said aloud, "I wonder if I can create a new reflection of the money in the shadow world, then bring it back through the mirror dimension without destroying it." It felt like a long shot, but with the mysterious workings of the strange new dimensions, he sensed there might be a way, and he wouldn't give up until he figured it out. He got home just before his mum did and waited for her to go to bed. Once she was asleep, he went to his room. He checked to make sure his $8 remaining were still in his pocket. He pulled out the timepiece and set it for the 3 o'clock world without hesitation. He wound it and rubbed the lid. Whoosh! Once again, he was deep in the Shadow World cave again. This time it was easy to find the opening. The fire he had started during his first visit still blazed, and the glow could be seen from deep in the cave. Once Hoops got outside the entrance, he laid the hand mirror against the wall and put the money in front of it. The light from the fire created 2 shadows of the money. He moved his mum's hand mirror in front of both shadows and was pleased to see 2 stacks of money in the reflection. Setting the pocket watch to 6:30, he wished, "I hope this works," as glowing particles in the air swirled around him again. His visit to the shadow world was so brief and hurried, he failed to notice the strange images and writings on the cave wall. Whoosh! Back in his room, he pulled out his money again and peeked out his door to make sure his mum wasn't sitting in the living room. Even though she went to bed, she often had problems sleeping through the night. She worked way too hard. Tiptoeing into the living room, he walked up to the mirror above the fireplace. His reflection followed his every move, and he was so happy to see his own face again. Carefully, he placed the stack of 8 $1 bills on the mantel and saw in the mirror's reflection 2 stacks of bills side by side. Hoops was so excited he could barely keep quiet. He had just used the timepiece and its worlds to double his money. Thinking through his next move, he knew he couldn't move a reflection from the mirror dimension back to the 630 world. That would destroy both the reflection of the money and the original stack of bills, just like the TV. The only thing he could think to try was to move a reflection from the mirror dimension directly into the shadow world first, and from there move it to the 630? It was hard to keep track of all the steps. This is getting crazy. I'm going to make a big mess of things if I'm not careful. But it was worth trying, and he was determined to continue his travels to the underwater world. He thought that adventures should always just happen, and never considered that he'd have to work hard at preparing for them. Setting the timepiece for 2 o'clock, Hoop realised that if he made this trip back to the mirror world, he would lose his reflection again. He didn't like that idea at all, and he almost considered giving up on this errand. He loved his reflection, and the feeling of not seeing it when he looked in the mirror was a very unnerving one. Still, he was familiar with the rules of the shadow and the mirror worlds, and his experience had taught him he could get his reflection back, following certain steps. Rubbing the timepiece, he gave his reflection a wink and a smile and said, "Sorry buddy, I've got to do this. I'll bring you back when my mission is complete." Whoosh! The reverse surroundings of the 2 o'clock world made him feel confused and woozy again. But luckily, the extra money he'd created was easily transported from there back to the shadow world. The dark 3 o'clock realm was the perfect back door for reflections entering the 630. When the reflections of Hoop's stacks of bills were whisked from the shadow world to his bedroom in the 630, they didn't dissolve into nothingness. Nor was the original money destroyed. This was the perfect loophole. 3 o'clock world, the shadow realm rule 3. You can move reflections from the mirror world into the shadow realm safely. From there you can move the reflection directly into the 630 without destroying the original or the copy. Now, I just created double money, but I have to go back and get my reflection restored at some point. He spent the next 2 days going through the 3 worlds in a circuit, over and over and over again, each time doubling the total amount of bills. It wasn't an adventure at all, it was boring, repetitive work, but Hoops knew it was worth it. It meant he could get on with his exploration of the underwater world, and having all that money also meant his mum wouldn't have to work so hard all the time. Of course, he couldn't tell her that until after he'd explored all the worlds the pocket watch had to offer. He had too many discoveries to make first. There was just so much to do and see, and now he had the money to do it right. After 2 days of hard work, copying and doubling his money, he took a taxi back to Scuba Stan's dive shop. He rented all the needed equipment and some extra film for his underwater camera. When he got home, he ate as much dinner as he could, knowing that swimming made a person hungry. He knew he would need as much energy as possible, so he told his mum he was going to bed early. "Are you feeling okay, Worthington?" His mum felt his forehead for a fever. She thought he might be getting sick. What 10-year-old boy wants to go to bed early? "Yeah, I'm fine. I just want the week to be over so I'm not grounded anymore. I figure the sooner I go to bed, the sooner the next day will get there." That's the type of thing he knew his mother liked to hear him say, and it was the truth, but it wasn't the whole truth.